Hi, everybody, and thanks a million for tuning in today. Delighted to be joined with one of our other videos with Sascha. So, Sascha is a dyslexic specialist and also an author of At Home with Dyslexia. Now, several moons ago, me and Sascha did our first video, so it seems like a lifetime ago. So, delighted to welcome you back today, Sascha. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Great. So we're kind of linking in with the whole theme of Dyslexia Awareness Month this month for October 2020. Obviously, there's lots of things going on, both economically and, in the Ireland system at the moment. But I suppose creating awareness is a really, really important stance that both Sascha and I have at the moment to kind of create this element of growth and progression, both within the education system and further afield. So Sascha, any things that you'd like to link in around creating awareness for people that have different ways of learning?
Well, I would say that I'm really pleased at how it's growing. You know, the Dyslexia Awareness Week and the month of October. When I think back to when I first got into this, nearly 20 years ago, there wasn't the awareness that we have now. So I suppose I have to be pleased about that. But there are elements that still are there where people are seeing dyslexia as a disability and it's something that you struggle with and we need to defeat it. Um, and that still bothers me. My book came out, it was published 2 years ago, and it's all around the language of acceptance and let's talk about dyslexia, let's name it, let's be comfortable with it, be at home with it. But I've seen. I was listening to a radio piece last week from Ireland, a national media, and again, dyslexia was introduced as something you struggle with, and they kept mentioning diagnosis, diagnosis, diagnosis. So it sounds like a disease. So we still got a way to go actually. In
Yeah, I think it's definitely a different. There's different mindsets, I suppose, that you can have it on it. Really, I suppose it definitely depends on is how early into the years I think you, let's say, uncover this different way of seeing things, both for the child or the person themselves. Obviously, being dyslexic myself, I went through a huge amount of education years with it being a challenge and being a struggle because there was no supports put in place and I wasn't, let's say, diagnosed or whatever is the terminology you want to put on it, till later into my kind of teenage years. So for that perspective, yes, it was a massive struggle because there was no help and support there. So that mindset then kind of continues on because you have this pattern of growing up being in struggling mode and survival mode consistently. Whereas what I suppose both of us are seeing at the moment is that a huge growth in, let's say, way younger kids, kind of even in first class, 7 or 8, going for their assessments and then getting the supports put in place quite early that prevents that judgment element and that prevents that struggling happening quite early.
Oh yeah, early intervention is really important, and I don't want to take away from people's struggles and challenges. Definitely not, but I suppose therefore we need to look at the system. The
Mm,
system giving the right supports, the supports that young people with dyslexia need, and I think first of all, um, we need to be able to label it, and we need to say comfortably you have dyslexia, let's look at what we can do. What are your strengths because of your dyslexia, not despite it? Again, when listening to this radio piece the other day, they talked about these visual spatial abilities and things like that, but it was spoken as if it was just incidental to the dyslexia and not part of the way a dyslexic thinks and sees the world. And I think people need to be made more aware of those abilities. And um, when I think about like the final illustration in my book and that Danielle did, which is just great. She did all these things, all these things that inventors and great creative dyslexics have created in the world, and what a boring place the world will be if we didn't have people with dyslexia, because they're the people that, the first to fly, discovered gravity. It's just endless. So, okay, not every dyslexic can be a genius expert in the top of their field, but it's it is something. It's not a coincidence. As I always say, it's not a coincidence. The top of every field is a dyslexic person, and yet in school they're made to feel they're stupid, that they are going to fail, and quite often, that is their experience because the system doesn't bring out their strengths and their creativity and
Completely. Yeah.
value that.
And as you said, definitely a systematic thing, like definitely trying to make it more inclusive and make it more, I suppose, diverse from an education system. But I suppose the system is how long old at this stage, and it's still stuck in that pattern of learn things off and rote learning, and here are your subjects, and learn off, Shakespeare and all of these different things. It'll unfortunately take a long time. Now that is hopefully moving and becoming a bit more flexible, but it will still take a lot of time for that to be very inclusive and very, I suppose, including different ways of seeing things. So for the kids at the moment and the teenagers that are still in that system, it is very, very difficult to have high self-worth and high self-confidence, and B, a lot of them, it's obviously very hard then for you to own, oh yeah, I'm dyslexic, because it's not something that, you go shouting from the rooftops in school. It is not something still that is greatly accepted or really recognized. As you mentioned, all of the strengths, they're really not put at the same level as to being able to do your spellings or being able to do all your maths. Yes, you might think differently, but that doesn't matter when you have your Friday spelling test. You can think all you want, but as long as you get your spelling test right. So it's still about, I suppose, it's still trying to create this awareness, but ultimately, if the system is flawed and isn't serving the students that are in it, there's only so much that can be done there, because they're still going to leave at 3-4 o'clock the day and be like, right, I have a load of homework, don't get anything that's happening today, and they're starting from scratch.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, rote learning is so difficult
Mm.
for people. I mean, how did you cope with your rote learning? Having to learn the Shakespeare quotes, having to learn times tables, your spellings on a Friday. I mean,
Just got the shivers, when you brought it up. I was like, oh gee, yeah, it's traumatic. It really is. It gives you an awful lot of long-term struggles, really. That's the only way of putting it. You have a vast amount of information as you progress through, obviously, education to the Lebenssearch. You have a huge amount of pressure, um, and it is really, really difficult. And obviously progressing on to university had its own challenges as well for me personally, with so much information and so much to take in and to learn. Not saying that it's not doable. However, coming up with different strategies and different methods kind of has helped me get to where I am with it. But unfortunately, there's so many people that are still in a system that just don't have the right tools, or just don't know how to kind of navigate through and get their goal or their outcome that they would like from it.
well, and I think this probably goes back to teacher training. How
Yeah.
much teacher training is there for dyslexia? I didn't have any. I learnt everything later on doing the Dyslexia Association week, and then my own research and experience basically over the years. So, but I don't know if there's any, or like an hour or something in the whole 3 years. I don't know. Um, I can see from my students' experiences of school that they have teachers that really don't understand the difficulty of rote learning, or that
Mhm.
actually dyslexia is an issue with the short term memory, the working memory, and being able to process things. And I think people are also really unaware of how hard people with dyslexia work. I mean, I bet you work really hard to learn your quotes and everything else, and then they'd slip from your mind, and then the teacher would think, well, you didn't you didn't study hard enough, you didn't put the
Yeah.
effort in. And yet you would work, most dyslexics work 4 times harder just to keep up.
I know. Yeah. And like with that element of work, obviously leads to a massive imbalance, and you have this consistent, basically a grindstone of going to school and learning off and learning off and learning off, and you become submerged and surrounded by it, which is what I did, because I was really, really focused to, I suppose, achieve somewhat academically the best way that I could. But that comes with a cost, and for me, that came with a cost of just different avenues and a different effect on my health and my well-being. And that's generally the slant that's coming out more and more, of just a huge overlap between people with learning difficulties and people with mental health issues. And that is
Yeah.
a pattern that is very much there. Yes, there is more recognition around it now. However, that early, I suppose, intervention and instilling those habits as early as possible in the child of balancing and sports and all of those things are really, really important to reaffirm, because there is that part that's like, oh, well, I have to work so much harder, so I just won't do that today, and I'll just go do like the studying, or I'll just go do the spellings. And that can become then a routine, which what it did for me and what it does for so many other people. And it's really often needed to have an outside person be like, nope, actually, you need to not do that now. You've had your 2 or 3 hours. That's loads. Go off now and have time to yourself or do something else.
You mean like what I say to you, take a
Yeah.
day off?
What you say to
What are you
me
trying to
just
prove?
before we started the video. Yes, that is what I mean. It's hard, it's harder at times. I think for all of us, you don't even have to be dyslexic for that to recognize where we are ourselves. We get caught into, oh, I'll do all of these things. And, obviously we're both doing courses at the moment and also running business on the side. So you can kind of get submerged into this achieving and moving forward and progression, and actually neglect then that you're a human being, and actually you're not a robot, that you can't just keep going on that spiral.
Yeah, I would say I would have anxious and stressed students of all ages, actually, from
Mhm.
primary right up to leaving cert. Um, and I think a lot of it is to do with their experiences in primary school, actually. It carries
Absolutely.
them through, those negative experiences in the early years of being put at the back, or,
Yeah.
doing sort of dumbed down work, compared to the rest of the class. Um, Makes them feel they have to achieve and work harder and harder,
Mhm.
and they don't stop,
Yeah.
and they get
And
very stressed.
the feeling, I suppose, stays with you. So from a physiological standpoint, let's say if a child got up and they were told, oh, you to read out this bit, and
Oh,
they go around the class and do all those reading. Even one incident like that of somebody freezing, or they can't read a word, or somebody laughing, even that has so much detrimental damage and lasting effects that it's so even hard to trace back as you get older. Then you're like, where did that, viewpoint come from? And it literally is those, I suppose at the time we see them as small incidents, but so catastrophic in having long-term
yeah,
impacts.
yeah. So what's the answer? What can we do? What can we, because this is still going on. I have 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds who are having those experiences that I also saw 15 years ago. So there's still not enough in terms of awareness and training for people in the education system.
Mm,
My book is for parents, and it's a dyslexia friendly book, but God, teachers could do with reading it too, just to get more of an
mm.
understanding of the actual issues for
I
dyslexia.
think, as you're saying, the training element is really, really vital. And obviously, we're creating this from an awareness standpoint, and more awareness, and more people just like tuning in and looking at things, and just creating, an element of, growth and information. People don't have to be dyslexic or have people that are linked to them that are dyslexic to read your book or to watch our videos. The whole idea of it is that hopefully people that maybe aren't connected to it can be like, oh yeah, I know a bit more about it now. And then, natural things progress in a few years' time, or they might then have a conversation with somebody about it. And it just helps create kind of those open doors a bit more, instead of that very old stereotypical thing that we often talk about of, oh, sure, you can't read and write, so because you're dyslexic. Like,
Oh,
and
and then
that,
they tell a joke. Then they tell a joke, which is always the same punchline about mixing up letters, and it's like
yeah,
I still get that sometimes.
yeah,
Somebody tells a joke, and it's like that is not funny.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
what, what?
Yeah, and it's strange. Like, it really is. It's a strange one, I suppose. It's definitely, there's an awful lot to be done, and there's an awful lot that can be done to move things forward. I suppose for last week, for Dyslexia Awareness Week, the Dyslexia Association and Senator Tim Lombard, who we had a video with last week, they were creating, I suppose, a meeting with Taoiseach about how they can move things forward and progress things from an education system. So it's more of, making more continuous based assessments, starting those conversations as well around the Leaving Cert process, and how
Mm,
obviously that didn't go ahead this year. That, is that something that can be continued on more into the future, because that system is so far past broken and it's not even repairable.
yeah,
So it's definitely early stages of those topics and discussions, and definitely I think have helped, obviously, with being how difficult COVID is in so many different aspects, with that move and with that change, with schools being closed and with exams being impacted. That has definitely created more of a conversation and more of a need for things to change, and also because of the uncertainty, who knows, are they going to go ahead next year? So there is more of a need to actually, right, see what we can do more
yeah,
immediately as well, not 5 years down the line. What can we actually do
yeah.
now to actually change things?
I suppose one good thing then is, we've had a bit more of a speed up of the use of assistive technology because of
Mhm.
this situation during lockdown. That more schools then it's iPads, it's
Yeah.
everyone's using technology. It's like, oh great, at last, dyslexic doesn't have to prove anything. They can actually use this technology to help them. And I think a lot of my students they preferred in some senses doing it remotely. But then the working memory, the stresses would come in where they'd forget to send the homework back in,
Yeah.
or there wasn't the routine that they needed.
Yeah,
Um,
there's definitely pros and cons to lots of those situations, but I suppose hopefully what it will create is that element of some bit of flexibility and some bit of trying to accommodate things and change things around. As you said, it isn't as rigid now as they need to have all of the, details about why they're typing and why they're typing up their homework. There's more of a leeway, I suppose, really, with being like, oh,
and having
we can do things
e-books as well.
differently. Yeah, they've grown
Suddenly they
massively,
can
I think. Yeah, yeah. There's so many tuning in to listen to all the ebooks. They go to one or two classes and they're like obsessed with ebooks. They just can't get rid of them at all. So yeah, I think it's definitely um moving, and hopefully moving in the right direction rather than in the other direction.
Yeah, I mean, and also I suppose, Danielle, the illustrator of my book, and I, we started doing videos on each chapter because we were in lockdown and because
Mhm.
we were at home with dyslexia, literally. That we just it gave us something to do. She lives near me, and so we were able to start making the videos on each chapter to sort of help people at home in this situation. But then it just became a general thing, just doing the chapters, and it's it's certainly a way to grow awareness of dyslexia, definitely, because I have people, as you said, who are not dyslexic who are looking at the videos going, oh yeah, yeah, this is really interesting, and um, associations are sharing it, the British Dyslexia Association, things like that. But maybe we're preaching to the converted
Yeah.
uh, in a way. It is our own national associations and things who are sharing them. But if we can get things like that out to other people to make them more aware and understanding, and particularly, I think people working in the education system. I mean, just yesterday I got an email from a parent who was very stressed because I think an educational psychologist didn't see the importance of giving a label to dyslexia for their child
Mm.
who was in third class. It was like, they're getting supports. Why do you need the label? But it's like, well, once you have it, you can go with it. You can explore it, and it becomes part of who you are, and not to be uncomfortable about it, and in any way, and also to get the supports that they want.
Yeah, I suppose it is a difficult dilemma. That's something I've seen more and more emerging as well, particularly in younger students, is to don't want to be, let's say, linked to that label so early. It is a difficult call, you know, it really is. And it's there and needed to be there and put in place there in order to get all these supports and accommodations. Um, but then there's also, you know, if a person is dyslexic, then there's that element of trying to, you know, accept that and take that on board. And obviously, the
Yeah,
earlier that can happen can
very
prevent,
better.
you know, onset and further ongoing things. However, there's still people, you know, that I work with in their 50s and 60s and don't remotely welcome or accept their learning
Mm,
differences as well. So it all really, as we said, stems back to from a childhood perspective and how early things are spotted and how their primary school kind of system goes.
yeah.
Because a label, yes, but then there's, you know, there's ups, there's pros and cons with everything is my standpoint on it at the moment, I think.
So how old were you when you found out you were dyslexic? I'm not going to
I was
say
nearly
diagnosed.
17.
You were 17.
Yeah, yeah,
So all that struggle through your primary years and nobody spotted it.
yeah. Left many scars.
And here you are doing your bit.
Yeah,
You
it's
made up
left
for
the.
it.
Yeah, but you know, it's taken a lot of work. Yeah, it has taken a lot of work to get to this stage. So I can see it from both stands, but I can really
Yeah,
resonate and obviously see it from how difficult and just how you're trying to consistently battle. You know, that's literally it. You get up every day and you have to go into battle. So I do completely resonate with the struggle element. However, the best way to try and prevent that, I think, is the earlier that supports and things are implemented, the more a child can become accustomed to accepting and viewing it differently maybe than I did at my childhood.
yeah, definitely. In my experience, the earlier the better. But
Yeah.
that's not taking away from the ones that find out later on. I would certainly always have students who are finding out at your age, 17 and stuff, and it's like, in a way, it is a relief because it's like, okay, this explains everything. Um,
Yeah, it's also that's something that's come up quite a lot as well recently for me. That people are like, "Oh, you know, it was so late. Was it a relief?" Realistically, no. For my personal opinion, anybody that I've spoken with as well, we've done a few videos recently with fellow dyslexics, that some didn't know till they were in college. It's for me, no, because not being a bit more brutal about it, but lots of, you know, not so much damage. I can't think of another word other than damage at the moment, but there was lots of things that had been already so difficult that it really didn't change my viewpoint on things. You know, I was still going to have to go in and set my leaving cert several months after that, with having to know the same amount of information as everybody else.
did it
So
make you angry? Did it make you angry that you didn't get the support you deserved when you were younger? Then.
I suppose it's mixed, definitely. There's definitely kind of a different viewpoint on it now as I kind of look back in hindsight from what I did have at the time. At the time, no, it was basically just survival mode, and I kind of was like, well, I just gonna have to get this done, and didn't really do a huge amount of, you know, thinking about it. As I look back now, yes, because I suppose I see it more now in the students that I work with, and I'm trying to hopefully help them move forward and not have the same kind of impact that I had. But yes, there's definitely an element that's needed to, as we said, link all back into the early intervention, to help prevent that really onset struggle.
Yeah.
But yeah, we took a bit of a
Oh,
slant there now down to
so I always get that out of my students, me.
yeah, we'll just do a one-to-one there now after this. But listen, I suppose overall, as you were mentioning, today is just about us, I suppose, trying to regroup and create that awareness. As we said, it doesn't have to be for people that are dyslexic. We're delighted for people to kind of tune in that don't have any affiliation with it, because it just takes one and then takes another one, and bit by bit, not being cliche, but bit by bit can try and help create the change and help create and move forward. So thanks a million for joining us today, Sascha, and
You're
all your
welcome. You're
insights and probing questions there towards the end.
welcome. You can cut it out.
Thank you for tuning in. Obviously, we'll take in any comments or any suggestions if you want to message us directly, or drop any comments below. Thank you.